Hey, fellow GNTers, those of us who like our spirituality with a twist. So Daniel and I are doing 9 things that will fuck up your life or could fuck up your life
Or might.
and might fuck up your life. Work in progress in the title. It should be 9 things that could fuck up your life, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are we going will fuck up your life seems too harsh.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Possibilities. So we're working on this thing. They're the Taoist 9 obstructions. And we've been spending some time hovering around number 5. And there's lots of ways you could take that one, as we've been talking about, Daniel, in these couple episodes. But I know for my slant on it was something like really thinking about what happens when the mind starts sort of torturing itself or something, right?
Yeah. And I'll read it, Eric, just real quick, because I always like to,
Okay.
just because it's been a couple, we've done a couple other episodes in between the last one and this one. So it says, in your youth, you were unwilling to cultivate, and in old age, you continue to injure your spirit. Even when you lose your vitality and become ill, your mischievous mind still refuses to wake up. Or you were born into hardship and were doomed to suffer all of your life, being plagued by self inflicted suffering and crushed by adult livelihood. This is the fifth obstacle.
So the weird thing about it, when you really read them all relative to one another, the first one talks about like insecurity, and this one kind of overlaps with that. And one of the later ones talks about you keep procrastinating and you never get around to really developing yourself. That's like number 9, I think. So that's kind of a funny one in that it has a lot that it covers. But I mean, I think the part that we were trying to really dwell on was this idea of this mischievous mind, as I think as you were calling it, right?
Yes, yeah, the
The mind
mischievous
that
mind. Yeah,
will screw you up.
that was a few episodes ago, but yeah, that was like the beginning of
Oh,
the
the
this
idea of how we're
breakdown.
talking. Yeah, how to talk about this.
Yes.
And so for I mean, whenever with this one in particular, I really have tried to take the attitude of we want to have this to be an honest podcast, right?
Yes.
Where we talk in an honest way about what it really means to try to use these things within the practicalities of a real life, right? Not a theoretical thing, but like a real thing. And this, I mean, I think I'll look at the past year and a half for me, give or take, is one of those years and a half where you're like, wow, a lot of stuff happened. It was very intense relationship with one particular person, and really thought, okay, this is a soulmatey person, and put a lot of my heart into things. It's one of those years you look back and you'll remember, you know what I mean? And there are probably years that like we all have that are like that. You look back and say, ooh, that was an important year. 2018, important year for me,
Yeah.
I can say that was a year that mattered. So this was a year that really mattered. Lots of ups and downs in it of various types, right?
Sure.
Some of it's more like a thing that could fuck up your life, number 3. Interpersonal relationships, but like intense, right?
Sure.
And I rode a lot of emotional waves. And in doing this one, I thought, okay, when I really think about, the mind that gets mischievous, what it means when you're riding a lot of emotional waves and going through maybe things that are intense or difficult, I decided, okay, this is what I wanted to emphasize in this one, right? To make it as personal as we possibly could, to really talk about our experiences trying to use these things, right?
Yeah.
And so it's been a point of like real exploration. And it also got me looking back, thinking, okay, what have I done at other points in my life? Like 2018 was very serious, like some of these years where it was really serious. How did I handle these things? And that I think led to something you wanted to do for a long time, anyways, was really talking about like different kinds of meditative techniques to work with
Yeah.
the mind in this way,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, all right, it ended up being kind of like that, right? And so we wanted to talk a little bit about this thing called ecstatic Kabbalah, as in ecstasy in Kabbalah. And really with the idea of like working on also the idea of meditating on letters. And you reminded me, Daniel, we had done things on sound, right? We had done the
Yeah.
mantra sound things. So this is more the visualization of the letters, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a meditative technique. And again, for me, reflecting back on it, times when I've gone through, again, emotional ups and downs or something, how I was handling my mind, it was like this was a kind of a major player in parts of my life too. Yeah.
Eric, if you would, um, just Kabbalah, because we have never really done like too much. I mean, we talk about Kabbalah a little bit. We have in the past, but for newer listeners, or as a refresher for those who don't have everything memorized, if you want to give just a quick rundown of that. And I also think it would be nice to highlight the spiritual side of Judaism in particular at this current time.
So I think To go through all, I mean, it's a fair question. To go through all of Kabbalah it's like, well,
No, no, no.
it's its
Yeah,
own deal, right?
yeah,
So I
yeah.
think the purpose of what we're doing here, we can say it's the mystical aspect of Kabbalah, of Judaism, right?
Sure.
It's the mystical aspect of Jewish culture. The main person we're going to talk about is kind of an interesting person within this. It's going to be this guy named Abraham Abulafia, who deserves his own episode from us too at some point too, because he's a spiritually intense, unusual human. And so, Kabbalah is a big subject matter, but I suppose for this, it would be like the mystical aspect of Judaism, the same way Sufism might be like the mystical aspect of
Yeah,
Islam or something, right?
yeah,
And it has like any of those things that like Buddhism itself. What is Buddhism? Well, it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
sure.
So it has lots of different things within it, right? We're going to look at one part of it, but what hit me about that, Daniel, is like we've been doing this thing now for what, going on, what are we, 3 or 4 years? How long have we been doing
4
this?
years in July.
Wow. We still haven't talked about a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
When I was putting this together, like we still haven't done our full Kabbalah, which I promise we'll do at
Yes.
some point, right? And really dive into the deep parts of the different branches of Kabbalah. It's something I'm looking forward to ultimately doing too.
Sure.
But it's so strange. We've been talking for 4 years, and I realized we still haven't scratched the surface
Yeah.
of the stuff that we can legit talk about because our interests are diverse enough and our experience is intense enough to share these things. So kind of trippy, but maybe for now it's the mystical aspect of Judaism, right?
Okay.
Yeah, maybe we'll leave it hanging like that, and so in that sense it's kind of like similar to, like, again, Sufism, mystical
Mhm.
aspect of Islam. Okay, there's a lot you could say beyond that,
Right.
obviously, but it like at least clues you into some of what we're talking about.
Right.
But we'll talk about a particular aspect of Kabbalistic meditation today. I mean, that was the idea I had in my mind. Anything else you want to say about Kabbalah in particular? I'll throw it back
No.
to you. Okay, we'll
No.
leave it like that for now. Yeah.
Yeah, there was just one idea that you mentioned before about the one of the philosophies of like the soul as a broken mirror.
Well, they talk about this idea. This is like what Lurianic Kabbalah goes back to this guy, this very important, I shouldn't say this guy, this towering spiritual figure, not just a dude.
Some bro.
Yeah, he's a bro, Uh, uh, and so Isaac Luria is one of the most important Kabbalists. And I think for him, it'll be worthwhile and I think spiritually inspiring for us both when we really take his idea of the world apart. But I was really affected by, him too. And he has this idea that when the universe emanated out from its pure source. And so in that way of thinking, God isn't really even a dude either, or a
Right.
guy. God is sort of like a pure source. In some ways, it reminds of like the Tao in Chinese culture or something. But then what happens is that the creative aspect of things kinds of shatters and it all kinds of spreads around. So it's sort of like these sparks of the divine are all spread everywhere. And the job of us as human beings is to unearth those sparks and put them back together again
Hmm.
and reconnect the shattered sparks of things. I think that affected me pretty deeply, to be honest, that idea. I
It,
didn't know we were going to be talking about this, but yeah, I think about that quite a bit, probably.
yeah.
That we're kind of hunters for the sparks. And
Hmm.
when you find the sparks, you try to piece them back together. I think that's sometimes the way I talk the way I do, because I still have that idea floating around my head. When something important happens, I try to recognize it because I'll go like, oh, that's a spark,
Yeah.
whether that's with a person or an idea or a new opportunity within, maybe your profession of healing or something. That oh, that's a spark. I have to connect those things. I do think that way. Do you think
Yeah.
that way too intuitively, Daniel, or no? I mean, I had that idea floating through my head for sure.
I think of I don't know. I mean, when I think of like undifferentiated states of being,
Mm,
there is a sense of like continuity, right? And I know those two words are synonyms, but what I mean when I say it is that like, and for those who are listening, you're not going to see my hands, but I'm going to like move things back together, like you're playing a river, or
yeah.
you're watching a river, but you're playing it in reverse. So you're moving back through the streams of differentiation to find a place of unity. So in that sense, it's very similar, I guess you could say, to like recapitulating a puzzle back together.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of what Isaac Luria is talking about in part. When we break it apart, we can look at it even, in more depth with it. But it almost like there's this emanation out of formlessness into form, and it's kind of in this perfected state. But to
Yeah.
make reality what it is, it has
Yeah.
to break. And so, okay, it seems chaotic, it seems shattered, but like the goal of us now is to go through and like rebuild that stuff. And as we do it, we develop more and more of our own divine powers. So that's a little bit where like the Buddhist Tantra picks up, kind of. As
Sure.
we learn how to put the sparks together, we're developing more and more of our divine powers, right?
Yeah.
And the way they talk about the like the force of resistance, the Satan, you know, it's
Mm.
interesting there too, because it's something that holds things apart.
Yeah.
But we have to develop the perseverance, the courage, the will to like overcome that, you know. I'll talk about it later on because I'll talk about the Kabbalistic rabbi I first learned this from. I do have it in the notes up the road, so I'll
Sure.
turn back to him. But he would say something like, you know, if you're just playing a basketball game against nobody, you're not going to get any better.
Right. It's
You
true.
know, you just do a layup every time. You know, you can score forever. But the way that reality was created was to put you playing against the Bulls, you know,
Not the Bulls of today.
not the Bulls of today. They
not
barely make the playoffs. Bulls, nope, they're out.
not those
We
Bulls.
got in the playoff game close.
And these and for our international listeners, these are the below 500, but just below average Chicago Bulls basketball team. Not
Of the now.
yes, currently.
I think one of their players got second place in the most improved player of the year award. Second.
That's right.
Yes. Second. Just out of the playoffs. Yeah. So the Chicago Bulls, it's as opposed to like the Michael Jordan Bulls,
Yeah.
right? You can play against MJ, you're probably gonna get better.
Right.
So he would kind of use that metaphor, that imagery, you know, if you're playing against the old school Lakers or you're playing against the, you know, the Golden State or something of these great basketball teams or whatever, right?
Right.
You know, that's how you're going to get better.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's kind of the structure of creation, to go through and work against resistance, to work against difficulties. And that's how you become more and more powerful yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a cool idea. I was very impressed when he started laying this out. I was like, okay,
Yeah.
I know it's, you don't know if it's true or not, okay, but like as a spiritual tool,
Sure.
deep, you know, and it, you know, certainly matches my experience of what it means like to do Zen before that in my life, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. So, anyways, the plan would be like we'll do a deep dive into all of this. That'll probably take us weeks and weeks and weeks, but you know, it'll be. I mean, it's just amazing to think we have so much shit that we haven't covered. It's unbelievable. We never really did anything good about Taoism. Not
Nah.
really. We haven't even done that much Chinese medicine.
We haven't done any Chinese medicine. I mean, really, we haven't done any Chinese. The most Chinese medicine was in what was the episode we had Rory on, Rory Hiltbrand. I think I called it
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
the Frontier of Mystery, which is a great episode. People should go check it on it, and he'll be back again. So we could just leave Chinese medicine up to Rory, and you know.
no, we gotta do ours. Can't just
We-
dump it all on him.
you
Make
know,
him all
we
responsible.
need you know, field experts. You know, he's our Chinese medicine person on call. We have anthropologists.
No, Daniel, we're the Chinese medical people on call
Nah, we're just subject matter experts on other things.
for the purpose of the show. Okay, I'll roll with it. Um, so anyways, like, you know, so for me, I think we're a little bit bouncing around the different meditative techniques, but it's sort of what united it for me was like, oh yeah, I've really used these things in times of trouble or crisis or something, right?
Yeah.
You know, so I think the goal was to share things that we've used in these special moments in our lives or something. That's how I tried to approach it. So,
Yeah.
um, and I also was kind of like, and I wrote you about it earlier today. We were kind of like finalizing how we're going to handle this episode for today. I was like, I want us to talk about this ecstatic Kabbalah because I was interested in this whole idea of bliss. And so I thought maybe before we even talk about the letters, maybe we kick around a little bit about bliss again, just because I've been looking at this for myself and I keep thinking, yeah, this is the real curing point, right? This bliss thing is so
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
And it's been like, again, in the very recent now, I'm talking like in the last few weeks, I've been going, okay, what's the real thing that solves this stuff? And I'm like, no, it's really this bliss, you know, and that's sort of my empirical feeling about this. And so I was, you know, I was typing up a little bit my ideas of what I wanted to talk about today. And I was thinking, okay, what are some of the main themes that we're always trying to get across here? We each have our own things we care about, right? And I
Yeah.
was like, oh, this is a really important one for me. This idea that it's the bliss that has to be curative. that the bliss is kind of the true antidote on
Yeah.
some level, coupled with wisdom, of course, and other good spiritual qualities, compassion, love, and so on. But you sort of really need the bliss. I kind of went a little deeper into it than maybe I have thought about it before, but even if you were to realize everything was interconnected, that still wouldn't solve suffering. You could be interconnected with a bunch of crappy stuff. You'd still suffer.
Right.
You know? Even if you realize formlessness or something or emptiness, you could still be suffering. You need
I think
bliss.
well, not only, but the only counter argument I have to that would be that, like, if you realized and lived interconnectivity, you lived it, that there would not be the longing for things would change, you know, that you would feel other people's things and therefore your behavior would change. You know what I'm saying? And so the suffering of loneliness and separation and inability to have compassion or sympathize with others would be gone, right? That would be eliminated because you would inherently know that this person was, having a bad day or whatever.
So do you feel like, again, open-minded about this, right? And just curious what we both think.
Yeah.
When I was really thinking about the dukkha problem, the problem of suffering today, as I was like thinking about these notes, I was like, yeah, I guess it has to be this way. But maybe you feel like, no, like, is the interconnectivity thing you think enough?
Well, I
I
mean,
have to,
it's not all of them, but yeah,
okay, okay.
but it's an important part because, all right, so if I think of
I mean, it's part of truth, right? It is true that that's the case, right?
yes, yes, and
You need to
so
have truth, right?
yeah, and so I'll lean on my experience with like psychedelic retreats out of the country, where they're legal, and for people who don't have meditative practice, which unfortunately is more people than do, and from my experience, people who have deep awakening experiences via psychedelics, which I think from talking with deeper meditative teachers don't necessarily find their experiences to be stable, right? Those people, they're not a stabilized experience. They're a flash, if you will. However, it can be a very deep and long lasting flash, actually. And you give yourself that opportunity that you might not normally receive otherwise. And for many people, there's a lot of life lessons, there's a lot of deep healing, but a lot of it is like understanding the interconnectivity and that
Mhm.
we're all from the same source and there is joy and gratitude almost across the board when people get to that place. There's fear of the immenseness of it all, but then also like, holy shit, what was I tripping about? What was I worried about? You know what I'm saying? Like this
Yeah.
kind of thing, and that smile on your face, I've seen it many times.
Mhm, mhm.
And I think that I mean, I can't say for sure because we don't know people's experiences, even if they try and describe it. But I feel like that's that interconnectivity spark that they see, that they're just like, boom, even if they don't understand egolessness or timelessness or whatever, that particular piece is one that like helps you feel infinitely and intimately connected with everything else. And that spreads you out in all different kinds of ways and transcends your own limitations.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I wonder if, from the way I like think about this, whether or not those moments of like realizing interconnectivity take you away from some of the more gross level limitations of,
Yeah,
being like, okay, I'm just this dude sitting here in this place and time, right? So you transcend that. And as you transcend that, you tap into parts of yourself that are closer to source, you might say, just to make
sure.
it right. And in doing that, you feel more the bliss of feeling not only interconnected with everything, but you feel that bliss of being close to source or something. Right.
Yeah,
So I wonder if like I would think of it like that, because we're all gonna have our own ways of framing it, all
sure.
legit, right?
Sure.
Dalai Lama says something really funny about it. Like some people will go in through the bliss door and some people will go in through the wisdom door.
Yeah,
So for some people, bliss becomes the lead. And so for some people, wisdom becomes the lead. Maybe I'm more the bliss type person or something. I don't know.
I wish.
Yeah. But in any case, like I was just thinking like as I was thinking about what's been the curative thing for me as I've been riding the emotional waves within the last few weeks, even, I was
Yeah.
like, this seems to be the thing that I can always return back to. And then I did start thinking about the suffering problem, because the thing in Buddhism in the end, or I would hope in like really any spirituality, is you have to overcome suffering, right? And it has
Yeah.
to be overcome. Otherwise, I
Yeah.
don't know what this is about. Do you agree with that kind of in
Yes.
general?
Yes.
I think that has to be the case, and that I think for all of us as people who are trying to improve ourselves and maybe trying to work on ourselves in this spiritual way,
Yeah.
I think that you have to use that as sort of the goal ultimately or something, right? And that's the thing you could use for your feedback mechanism. Am I able to get out of this suffering? Do I know how to do that or something?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then almost how you could almost like self-test yourself or something like that.
Mm.
You know, not in a harsh way, obviously, not like, oh, I failed. Not
Yep.
suffer
No, it
more.
didn't work.
Not in that sense. I'm a loser again. F, not like that. But it's something you can use to feedback yourself or something.
Sure.
Anyways, I have like I don't know, see how this stacks up to like your experience around this or something. So, when I was putting these notes together, I was thinking about myself, and I had some conversations with people in the week about this too. I started off in Zen and Taoism, and there's certainly a bunch of bliss in that. And I did feel like I learned a lot about interdependence, which what got me thinking about this whole idea. Like, doing a Zen retreat, you feel interdependent with people for
Sure.
sure. You can tell, oh, that dude's knees hurt over there, and this guy has this thing going on, and this one, you can just feel that. It's very tactile and real.
Sure.
And people come out afterwards and are like, wow, that dude was really having a hard time. And everyone's like, yep, that guy was feeling that. Everybody knows. It's kind of astonishing, right?
Yeah.
When you first start really realizing it can be on that level of like particularity or something, right?
Right.
Really is interconnected, right? And so, I learned about that. I learned about the nature of the body and the mind, all kinds of stuff, that were very important experiences for me at the time. But there was also this Buddha nature thing that became really strong, and the bliss of feeling the root of your own being or something, right? That Buddha nature idea was really blissful, right? And people talked about that. They said, you're going to hit this place in yourself that's going to be so happy and blissful and joyous, and does feel interconnected. I think it's true what you're saying,
Yeah.
from my own personal experience of that too. But it had that thing where you feel, okay, I can feel Buddha nature inside me. I think Buddha nature is everything. Then you feel interconnected, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I had experiences like that, and they were really strong. And then the thing that's said afterwards is sometimes it's hard to carry that out into your life. Okay, that's a
Yeah.
known
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
But anyways, I had that. And then when I moved on from doing the Zen, and we don't have to revisit why these things happen. There were reasons why I felt like I had to move on. But I moved on to
Right.
studying with my TCM mentor, master, and Qigong and Taoist teacher, Master Shengli Wang. And I was thinking about him during the week a lot, because what he would say was, he would say happiness is kind of the key. And I had never had anyone tell it to me in those words before. But part of his meditation technique was to go and ask, what's standing between myself and happiness in this moment?
Mm.
And I was like, that's interesting. I had never heard it framed that way before in the previous things I had studied up to that point. And I got to realize that was a pretty powerful part of what he was asking his students to do, right?
Mm.
And he was working under the idea that's a very Chinese medical idea. Like we said, we never talk about Chinese medicine. Now we will for a second. That part of the emotions of the fire phase in the heart, that emotion is joy. If it's bad, it could be mania, something pathological.
Mm-hmm.
But there's an idea of like healthy joy is like an antidote, like the way I'm trying to talk about this bliss thing.
Right.
So I was like, yeah, I guess this is the joy he's looking for, that joy of the heart, you know, and kind of the clarity that comes along with that. And so, he would have other parts of his meditations, especially connecting to how he saw the source energy universe, which he called true chi, Zhen Qi. But this part about happiness was really important. I was like, okay, so I started thinking about that, and then I realized, well, so it was sort of like in a moment to moment way, you could ask that question of yourself: am I happy in this moment? Does my Shen and my spirit feel good in this moment? If not, what can I do about that? I'll make some kind of effort in that direction,
Right.
and I'll relax and kind of continue on. And I'll, just pose that question to myself throughout the day. So it was something he wanted you to do, as you would say, off the cushion too, Daniel, right? It
Right.
wasn't just,
Right.
it was something that you were going to carry out in your life. And I thought, well, that's cool. And I also felt like that was helpful to go to carry that kind of happiness and bliss, like actually out into life. you know, not that the Zen people weren't asking you to do that, but he was doing it in this very particular way. And in some ways it was also like in your life overall, like, am I happy in my life overall? If not, maybe I should rethink what those parts of my life and see if I can change something.
Right.
You know? So what hit me in the past week, flashing forward to the more like the Buddhist Tantra that we're talking about a lot now is some of our home base for these things. I started saying to myself, well, what stands between me and bliss in any moment? So I kind of like realized, oh, I'm building on Master Wong's meditation. And, sometimes we do that. It's interesting. I thought it was an interesting thing to share because you learn different things along the way from different people, but then you start to put them together, right? Your mind starts to synthesize them and you own them and they're your own then, right? So I felt like, okay, yeah, I'm really going to ask myself this question. What's standing between me and bliss in any moment? And the minute I started doing that, I realized like, oh, this is very curative.
Mm.
This is really curative. I can reinvest myself into this bliss experience of the moment, which maybe in my emotional ups and downs of, this window of time, I lost the thread of a little bit. I had other important threads I was trying to work on. It wasn't like I didn't think things were important, but I started realizing, no, I really, I have to reinfuse myself into that meditative experience. And it brought me back to what we were talking about, I think last time we talked a couple of weeks ago, which is this idea of the yidam, the meditation deities. So I can
Yeah.
feel bliss and I can be Tara. I can feel bliss and I can be, one of the great, Buddhist figures, right? Some of them are pretty saucy, so I could be that too, right? I
Yeah.
can feel almost like sexual bliss in the moment or something, right? Just meditatively in my own mind. Or for me, I like to work on these things a lot they call body mandalas, where you see the mandala inside your own body. And like I realized, oh, there's a lot of bliss in obviously doing that. And I just have to keep reminding myself of that. And like that was like the healing thing for me.
Mm.
I started thinking, okay, well, that's true in a moment by moment way. It's also where I can ask myself tough questions about my life, what my life is standing between me and bliss.
Sure.
If something is standing between me and bliss, I better rethink that. So anyways, I thought I would share all that and get your reactions to it because that's been my experience of like working with my own mind in the last few weeks, right? And we've all
Yeah.
had our own things going on. But I was like, I thought, well, that's interesting to share maybe with people and then kind of just throw out there for other people to think about.
Yeah, I think there was we get weird stuff on our Instagram, Facebook, social media feeds for advertising.
Uh-huh.
And I got something called Man Flow Yoga. And
Wow.
on the advertisement it said in big red letters, no spirituality. Right, which I was like, okay, that's interesting. So I looked at some of the comments because I'm like, this is going to be an interesting thing. And of course, there's all sorts of, comments back and forth. But I think the biggest part, I was like, wait a minute, you cannot remove spirituality from anything. You don't necessarily have to look at the eyes. You don't have to look through the eyes of spirituality to see it in everything, but you cannot remove it from anything. It's just a matter of do you want to see it this way or not? And so, while we're going through and giving different techniques for people to work with their mind, which has been something that I've wanted to do. We talked about this in the very beginning, going
Yeah.
over meditative techniques, is that it is not an escape in a sense. It's curative. You are using techniques that have been around for thousands of years. I don't know. At a minimum, a couple thousand. They have survived. So they're worth it to tell someone else, right? And that person practiced it and they felt it worthwhile to continue to tell another person to improve someone's own internal environment even as the external environment continues to grow more chaotic. And we don't often get into like the outside world too much on this podcast. I mean, once in a while we'll throw out some terms and threaten to do a neocon or a kind of podcast, which we'll probably never do, to be totally honest.
I think we have to do neoliberalism and you at some
Maybe
point.
maybe we'll do one,
That's a
but
real eye opener, right?
but
Yeah.
there's a ton of division. I was talking with the client earlier and I felt like I said I feel like this is almost like the summer of 2020, like just
Mm.
post George Floyd and pandemic lockdowns where people were just, it was fever pitched, in between what's going on in the European nations and in the Middle East, and then here back here, all these protests happening and election season. Like there's all this kind of like turmoil always going on, and it's particularly fever pitch, and it's not even that warm yet, and things always tend to get more intense as the yang rises in the summer. And so using these techniques, whichever one, you catch your fancy on, it's not a matter of obliterating the world. It's a matter of centering yourself in the midst of the chaos. And I just wanted to say that because I don't think you can remove spirituality from anything, number one, even the chaos that's going on. And it's important for people to find their way through things, because if not, then you are inevitably going to get washed over, and you will not have a sense of direction or a very strong sense of self. In the meantime, I don't mean self like your ego is going to survive, but self is in like your own principles and ideas that you find to have value are going to be tested, as they should, because as Eric mentioned earlier, if you play basketball against a really, shitty team, you're not going to improve. Well, fortunately or unfortunately, we're playing against like the dream team at this point right now.
Yeah, the Olympic team with Michael Jordan and MJ and Patrick Ewing and Karl
Yes.
Malone and yeah,
Yeah.
all great
Yeah.
American basketball players back in the day. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we are, at least what I believe, presenting things that don't cost you anything except for your time and effort. And if you do them, you will be rewarded. Maybe not instantaneously, but you absolutely will be rewarded. I've always liked to fancy myself an intelligent person. I was, quote unquote gifted programs growing up. I skipped grades. I always did well. But I can say that like the longer that I put in time during meditation, the more I can feel my own mind's ability to work and also simultaneously be flexible to learn and apply what I've learned to momentary situations. In the moment with people, I can reach back slowly, find what I need, and pull it forth in the moment. And I don't credit that to like latent raw intelligence. I credit that to meditation, to be totally honest. You know what I'm saying? And so the things that we are sharing here are, maybe for some people a little bit like pie in the sky, highfalutin-esque, but they're really not. These are real things that can change you for real.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely had the goal of like being able to work with my own mind, my own emotions in the moment. Like I
Yeah.
wanted to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And part of that wasn't just like, okay, I'll do this mindfulness thing for 10 minutes a day and then maybe I'll be a little bit happier. It was more like, okay, I really want to be able to work with myself. What do you think of that impulse? I mean, this is wasn't the theme of the episode or something, but now that you brought it up, it's so striking. I mean, you're going to have your own reaction. I'm actually curious what you're going to say about it. Like, what do you think of that impulse of like no spirituality? Like, where do you think that totally comes from? That people think it's just like new age bullshit or something, and they want the
It's just marketing. It's marketing.
oh, okay,
You
but
know what
it's
I'm
it's
saying?
done to appeal to a certain audience.
It's done to
What's
appeal to Western audiences
oh
specifically.
okay, just the physicality of the yoga without like namaste.
Correct. The
Like,
problem is that like if you are over 30, you probably are familiar with like Diamond Dallas Page, who was a wrestler from the WWF back in the day, who did this very thing with yoga like some years ago, and already had a huge following as he was a wrestler, and his body was all broken down from steroids and getting body slammed and doing the same thing, and he healed himself with yoga and helped many, many people with yoga. And so it's it gets sold as mobility, it gets sold as healing, help your flexibility, help your golf game, help your whatever. It's a means to connect people on a very baseline level. And so if they say yoga, then people think chanting, Lululemon pants, who knows,
right.
candles, breathing,
It's kind of
namaste.
kind of chicky or something, right? Like
Yeah, yeah, kind
or
of like,
something. Mhm.
yeah, but it's popular enough that people know that it must have some value, because it's not decreasing in popularity. It's
Yeah.
only increasing. Yoga teacher trainings are increasing, like retreats. Everybody knows somebody who's done some yoga. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Even their strange aunt. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
and so this is a way to reach out to an audience that it's going to be made more accessible. So by removing the quote unquote spirituality from yoga, then they're going to present that to people. But you cannot. You cannot. You start
It's
to pay
weird.
attention to your internal environment and your breathing and the sensations that are generated when you stretch, working with discomfort. Like all of that is spiritual practice. I'm sorry. That's what that's what it is. Like,
Yeah, it's strange. I mean, it's another whole episode and we'll let it flow off of this,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
it's weird how, I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, that's just all, I can't help but call it toxic on some level because there's this obsession with like the materialism, right?
Yes.
We'll just, because when you take away the spiritual, what you're leaving is the material from an American person's point of view, and if the word isn't said at all,
Right.
that's sort of what you end up meaning, right? Yeah, it's just ain't good. I don't know what to say about it.
Yeah, I know you don't love the analogy, but if you're going to use the software and hardware,
No,
uh,
no, I like the analogy. I'm
yeah,
cool with it.
if you're gonna
Yeah.
do that, then just say, okay, this software on this laptop doesn't work, so here's the laptop. Good luck.
Just go in there amongst those circuits and find where the electrons aren't traveling right. You'll fix that shit, no
Yeah, you'll
problem.
fix it up. Yeah, you're good. Yeah, Windows doesn't work. The keyboard works fine. The screen works totally good, but the everything inside of it, no.
Jesus. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mm. All right, so should we do a little bit on the letters then?
Do it. Yeah, we got it.
Okay. So yeah, you brought this up. I had like a little bit on the Kabbalah, and I just was saying that we haven't talked about this that much yet. I thought I should tell a little bit about my own little backstory around this, which was relevant to what I wanted to share here in terms of my own personal experience of trying to use this stuff and in a moment by moment kind of way. So for me, I had this Kabbalistic rabbi and his wife as patients, and then they were doing lecturing in Chicago.
Mm,
And I went to his lectures, and I had to say he was a great public speaker. He was the guy who did the basketball analogy thing and all that. And like, we you get the opportunities in what we're interested in to hear people who are really good public speakers. Like Lama Glenn is really good. Robert Thurman is really good. This guy was really good. I was like, it's someone who, ultimately, was a public speaker myself. I was like, okay, yeah, this dude's good, right?
mm-hmm.
Now it was a sort of a Madonna Kabbalah, right? It was a little bit pop, you know, and it had that layer to it. But he was great as a speaker, so I was impressed. And then it also introduced me into this whole world of Kabbalah. And so even though there was a Madonna Kabbalah part of it, because Madonna was interested in Kabbalah at one point, and like it never really took off. No spirituality will ever take off. Not really. Even Madonna couldn't make it happen.
But
But
I mean, I heard of Kabbalah because of Madonna. So
yeah, I mean, yeah, but like she couldn't fully make it work as a career move.
no, 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 no.
It was known at the time. She had to go back to like pretending to be a striptease artist and in the next set of videos, like the ones of her doing Kabbalah in a long flowing gown. No, no. Anyways, it is what it is. But underneath what was getting to that Kabbalah, and this guy who was really a great lecturer was like a real deep Kabbalistic underpinning. It was sort of my introduction to astrology. So that was cool. That mattered in my life, right? Because astrology has a particular role in Kabbalah, but it was also what we were talking about earlier, like this Isaac Lurianic Kabbalah, and these very deep philosophical things that kind of blew my mind open. And a lot of it had to do with the use of letters.
Mm,
So they were meditations on letters a lot, which got me wanting to talk a little about the person with the Ecstatic Kabbalah. This Abraham Abulafia, just for a second, just to put in some context, because we like to be a little teacherly. So here it
sure.
is, right? So he is one of these great Kabbalists from like the 1400s. I think maybe at some point we'll do maybe a deeper dive into him because he's such a fascinating character. He's kind of one of those wandering mystic types, Daniel, and I have a real soft spot for those kinds of people.
Mm-hmm.
You too? Yeah,
Of
soft
course,
spot for those
yeah.
kinds of folks. Yeah, I love the wandering mystic. And so he was wandering around. He's kind of like a Shamsa Tabriz type too, with Rumi, just wandering around causing trouble. I love those kinds of folks. And so there's all these amazing anecdotes about him and his backstory. I'll just like mention him real quick just to say a little about who he was. So apparently he went into the Holy Land and he was looking for this mystical river that was supposed to be only like secretly showing up at certain times where you can find the lost tribes of Israel or something like that. So he was trying to do that. And unfortunately, the same way it is now, it was just a war-torn area. So he realized like, oh, I can't go wandering around this area trying to find this mystical river. So he had to like skedaddle out. But he was that kind of a character, right? He was willing to go through and walk. He was born in Spain, but he was willing to travel, by foot into the Middle East, try to find this river. And so that's one of the anecdotes about him. And one of the other ones is his meetings with the Pope. So it's not obvious what he was going to do in meeting the Pope, but he decided he was going to meet the Pope. So he started walking to go meet the Pope. And he was telling people along the way, I'm going to meet the Pope, not thinking anything of that. So the Pope sent a message back, apparently, like, yeah, we understand you're coming to meet us and meet me, the Holy Seal. And I will go through and I have a nice pile of wood built for you. And when you get here, we're going to burn you. So, keep coming. So apparently he was, I guess, ambivalent whether he should come or not, but I think he still went, And the day he was supposed to get there to be able to meet this Pope, the Pope had a stroke and died. So our hero of the story, Abulafia, Abraham Abulafia, kind of went like, oh, well, I think my spiritual vibes are good. I'm getting clued into the truth of what I'm supposed to do. So he went forward and he still tried to go through and meet the people in the Vatican. They tossed him in prison.
Oh,
They kept him there, I guess, for a while. And as far as his notes on his own life, he was there for 28 days and then was released or something. And so he's a fascinating character. And eventually, we were kind of talking a little bit about beforehand, before we started the podcast. Ultimately, he was even canceled by the other Kabbalists because he was too outside the box. And like, that's going to appeal to my heart as well.
oh,
He got canceled. And it's, so he's an amazing person. But like, I think some of the things that appeal about him, at least for our podcast, is he's definitely an eclectic person. He's trying to pull together all these different things. And I was doing a little backstory on his history, preparing for the episode for today, because I wanted to share something about him, because we're going to talk about a little bit of his stuff. And I hadn't heard this quote exactly, but he was very accepting of the idea that people from other traditions had insights too.
mm,
So he was eclectical and universal in that sense. He's willing to say the people who are the mystics in other branches seem to understand things too,
yes.
and I can interact with them. And I got one of the books written about him by one of the scholars about him. I'll just hold it up for the camera. Studies in Ecstatic Kabbalah. It's very academic. I don't know if I can recommend the book just for a fun read, but there's like a chapter in here where they talk about whether or not he was influenced by this group called the Cathars, who was this group of Gnostics. So he was hanging around with all kinds of folks, apparently having all kinds of conversations. And it's interesting. So I thought that kind of talked to the spirit of our show too, someone
Yeah.
who's open in that way. And then the other amazing part that we were talking about before we got on camera was, he was like eradicated from history, like gone. And now, there's multiple books written about his thing. Like later on, I got a pile over here where there's multiple sitting here,
Yeah.
I grabbed off the shelf, and it's kind of amazing how the spiritual message will still get through.
Mm,
But there's something to it, It also makes you wonder that a lot of people maybe just disappear who had so many things to say, This
mm-hmm.
guy made it through. How many people don't make it through?
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's interesting. It's fascinating. But anyways, I have a soft spot for these kinds of figures. And I guess it comes from something that is, I couldn't help typing this out in the notes because I was like, I don't think anything good comes out of the normal. Just don't.
Mm,
I was talking with people about this in the past week, and I'm just like, no, I don't think normal produces that great. I got that inner Carl Jung vibe. I think you have to do something. You have to do something more, which I guess I wanted to bring up because that's one of the other points I was thinking about. I don't know what they are for you, but for me, the bliss thing is a big point. And I think this is a big point, obviously. And you have your own points. So, anyways, just hit me. So, I know. What do you think of him? He's interesting, right? Maybe we'll do something more about him later
yeah.
on.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know
Yeah.
anything about him. So,
Yeah. You got a soft spot for these rebellious figures like I do?
of course. Yeah. I mean, they're the ones
Yeah.
who, write history in a sense.
Shake shit up.
Yeah. I mean, who remembers the random blacksmith from, 1632 in Scotland? Like,
What's interesting in the fact that they tried to make the guy disappear, but he didn't. That's interesting, right? So anyways, for me, uh, true for both of us, I just was jotting this stuff down. And I was like, meditation is really a passion. So I've always been
yeah.
open to the idea of doing meditation from different types. I've been very open about that. I never wanted to be a dilettante. I didn't want to do things like half-assed. I didn't like
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
But if something was important, I would spend time trying to really learn it.
Mm.
When I met this Kabbalistic rabbi, I was like, okay, I'm going to try. Right, I'll really try to invest myself in this, and I'll really try to do the practices they're talking about, and I'll really study it. And so, I really did that. And my conclusion in the end was something like all these different meditation traditions are kind of valid, and they just have different things to teach.
Right.
So I thought I'd throw that out to you too. I'm assuming you feel the same way. You got anything you want to add on that?
Not at the moment, no.
Okay. Okay. I know it's just such a deep thing. I realized like, okay, I was able to study Zen. I was able to study Taoist things. I was able to study with my teacher from China. I was able to study with these Kabbalists. And I started to realize, okay, this is the way my life is kind of going. And I'm
Totally.
learning different things from all these people. And
Yeah, I
I'm
mean, I've
throwing
I've
my heart
mentioned,
into it. I'm really investing in it, right? But
yeah,
yeah.
I've mentioned that regularly. Like I've been blessed to have such fantastic teachers. But I can say that you're probably going to feel like you have great teachers if you're a decent student.
Yeah, it's true too.
You know what I'm saying? Like there's something on the pupils that are attracted to some teachers that make the teachers better if the student pushes them. If they take what they say and they go, okay, I'm going to believe you for now, and then I'm going to try it, or I'm going to study it, or I'm going to do it, or whatever. And then I'm going to ask you some real questions, and I'm going to see what you know, and I'm going to see how you know it. And then that makes those teachers better, and that makes their learning, their experience, their practice more deep. And it's because of the good students. So I feel like that relationship, is a, yin and yang. It's always sort of cycling around each other.
Kind of symbiotic in that way, right?
Absolutely.
I hadn't thought about it from that point of view. I had thought of like from the point of view of something we had talked about maybe last time we recorded, where I feel like we as people have to have the willingness to like have some passion and throw ourselves in.
Yeah.
I think you have to be willing to do that, right?
Yeah.
To like act from that place and say, okay, I'm really going to throw myself into this thing. And I would say for myself, and everything I did that with, it paid me back.
Mm.
That
Hmm.
willingness to do that. I got stuff out of it that had real value, but it was
Hmm.
that like, okay, I'm going to go for it. Right. So if I'm
Yeah.
going to study this Kabbalah, I'll try like for reals, and I'll try to learn what I can get out of it. Yeah. Oh, so then the specifics of like what he's doing here, if we get to our mystical twistical character of Abraham Abulafia. It's irrelevant to the sort of this particular season of the year too, because it is Passover season. It's Pesach, right?
Hmm.
So that was just happening in the week.
Hmm.
And so one of the things they talk about is this idea of the 72 names of God. And it's a meditation on letters, if you do it in the way Abulafia was talking about it. And it has a really interesting sort of backstory to it. There's the 3 paragraphs that are about the splitting of the Red Sea in the Old Testament, in the Torah. And they're, really interesting 3 paragraphs because each paragraph has like 72 letters exactly.
Mm.
So when people looked back at that with the eye of how people were interpreting those texts, they said, well, that's not a coincidence. No one would write 3 paragraphs in a row with exactly 72 letters there. There's something like, there's a reason for that somehow. There's something deeper embedded in that. And this tradition arose that those letters from those 3 paragraphs could be combined to create these 3-letter combinations. And this is the thing that became the 72 names of God, right? These multiple 3-letter combinations, the 24
Mm.
combinations that would eventually get you to the 72 letters. And I guess I pulled it out so I could read it just for the hay of it. So I'll do it real quick. Because I mean, it gives you a feeling of what they sound like in English, I suppose, right? So it says,
Mm.
and the angel of God who went before the camp of Israel moved and went behind them. And then the pillar of cloud moved from before them and then went behind and went behind them. And it came between the camp of Egypt and the camp of Israel, and cloud and darkness were there, and yet it gave light in the night, and one did not come near the other all that night. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and God caused the sea to go back with a strong east windfall that night. And it made the sea into dry land, and the waters were parted. So there's the 3 paragraphs, right? The way they would be in English. But I guess in the original text, 3 paragraphs, all 72 letters. So they went through and they combined them in this way, right? Now, this isn't a thing from our hero of the day, Abulafia. This is the thing that like was all over sort of Jewish mysticism, right? and these other great Jewish mystical books like the Zohar and the Bahir and things that we'll talk about maybe when we talk about Kabbalah more up the road. But he like Abulafia talks about them too. So for me, because I'm going through maybe this period of time and maybe because it's just this time of the year, I'm going to do them in kind of a sequence. So you can go through and kind of just find the sequence of the letters, and then you can just kind of stare at them and imprint on them and then try to imagine them in your mind's eye.
Mm-hmm.
For me, when I was doing more of this seriously in my when I was internalizing more of this Kabbalistic stuff, I did memorize the alphabet. And that alphabet is very unique in that it has these 22 letters, and 12 of the letters are supposed to represent the astrological signs. 5 of the letters are supposed to represent the planets in the solar system. 2 are supposed to represent the sun and the moon. And then you get this idea that there's like 3 other sort of source letters or something. So the whole alphabet has this mystical quality to it. And we kind of knew today we weren't going to be able to talk about Sanskrit, but Sanskrit has its own vibe. So these spiritually powerful like languages sometimes have these
Yeah.
spiritually powerful alphabets.
Yeah.
Which is weird because we don't think about that in English. I don't think. I don't know if other people think about that when they're writing German or French anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Letters had power, right? And that's the reason they were made the way they were, right?
Yeah.
I was reading like this old book where they like it came up where it's fiction. It's Robert Graves. It's I Claudius. It's kind of
Yeah.
writer where he's writing about Rome, but they're talking about the Druids in England and the fact that
Yes.
they had this power in their language, they had this power in the letters. We just lost that feeling, right?
Yeah.
We just don't have it anymore. So, anyways, the idea is that there's a power. So the letters represent things, the letters represent energies in nature, the letters represent numbers. The letters have all these different meanings in Hebrew, right?
Yeah.
If it's not you're interested in Kabbalah, it's one of the things you learn. You start studying the letters, right? Because they have this power and they can be meditated on. So so for this week, I'll do that. I'll do these 72 names of God. And Abulafia was really interesting. He kind of said, okay, you can do them in this sequence. And there are books you can get where they'll just be called like the 72 names of God, and you can just kind of see the order. So if you felt inspired to try it, you could try it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just look at them and picture them. For me, I got more serious. So I actually memorized the alphabet and I sort of tried to visualize them in a more serious way. But it's an interesting way to try to meditate, just to see the letters in your mind's eye. So you look at them, you imprint on them, you close your eyes, you see if you can hold them in front of your eyes, right? And then you do that for a little bit and you can move on to the next sequence. Abulafia also had this thing where he would do kind of like, they call them yogic movements. They're not really yoga, but he would move his head like in certain ways, up and down, side to side, back and forth, um, uh, in sequence to sort of like, kind of like intoning the letters too. So he would visualize them, and he would also do things where he would move his head and his neck around. And he developed some technique where he thought that, like, I guess probably freed the flow within the brain, freed the flow within the neck to allow the spiritual power to be more easy to access or something like that, right? By activating. So these very particular movements. There's a book from this another one of our close to our heart kind of characters. I'll hold it up to the camera. It's a Ecstatic Kabbalah again, kind of about Isaac Lurie. It's from Rabbi David Cooper, who passed away a few years ago. He's another guy after our own heart because he was a Zen student. He was a student of Sufism. He was a student of Kabbalah. And eventually, he kind of goes through some of these techniques from our Abulafia too, right? And he kind of shows the head movements in there too. They have a lot to do with the vowels that are associated with the letters or something. So he'll do these things either on, say, something like this 72 names of God. Sometimes he'll do them where you'll just visualize the tetragrammaton, the name of God from the Torah, right, or the Old Testament, where it's the Yod, the Hey, the Vav, and the Hey. You just visualize those things. So there's a part of my life where I was really doing this very seriously. And I would say that they were, just extremely powerful experiences for me, right? And I was trying to explain to a friend of mine, I got very impressed by how meditation works, because I began to feel like you would do these things and you definitely felt that there was some divine presence out there, like you really felt it. It was very clear. And I remember trying to explain to one of my friends who's not into this kind of shit at all. But I was just like, it's an amazing thing to be able to do this and then really feel the effect of the meditation. I started realizing, like, oh, these different meditations have these different things they're trying to have you experience. And if you kind of throw yourself into them, you'll get the experience, right? I didn't go in with any pre-expectations of what I was going to feel. I wasn't thinking meditating on some Hebrew letters was going to mean that much. But as I did them, I was like, yeah, this feels really powerful, you know? And because it was powerful, I began to use it again in some of my times of crisis. When my dad was dying of cancer, I did them, and I was there with my dad and I was kind of holding his hand and we were doing hospice with him and it was towards the end of his life. And he wasn't a religious or spiritual person exactly. He was his own creative, free spirited person in his own way, but he wasn't that kind of person. But I can say like, holding his hand as he was like going through like the ending parts of his life, it was super powerful, and those experiences of like someone dying, the spirit separating from the body, the shen separating from the body in Chinese medical speak is really powerful anyways, right? So I did it then, and I did it in times of like interpersonal crisis where I felt like, relationship things were painful. So anyways, I just wanted to share it as another one that I personally used. I don't want to just keep blabbing about this, but have you done anything like this? Does this ring a bell to anything you've done in any of your experiences?
I mean, using the letters in Sanskrit,
Yeah.
in the Buddhist tradition, they do. I don't know if it's exactly the same, but they'll do that, and you bring your mind to settle on not just the letter itself, but the sound of the letter too, right? So it's not only a visualization, but so you have the sound of the letter, the vibration that that letter has, the feeling that that letter that symbol has, um, and it's yeah. I mean, I'm thinking, when you talk about the 72 names of God, I'm thinking about like in the Sufi tradition when they'll
Yeah.
when they go to practice their chanting practice, they use the 99 names of God, and they sort of do this kind of chanting. They call it zikr, which means remembrance. And they're using some of these kind of similar techniques. So it's interesting to be reminded and to illuminate different things from different cultures, yet they're all using similar techniques to bring yourself to that, to kind of like, again, like I said, like working back on the spectrum of differentiation, working back towards a more unified uh field, a more unified experience from where they, closer to the source, if you will.
It was weird because like the guy who wrote the book on this Abulafia, I'm pulled up to the camera again, this Moshe Idol over here. I looked at an interview with him and he was like going on like there's no such thing as a perennial philosophy.
Mm,
Like kind of bitching about the idea like there's this universal perennial philosophy that underlies all the spiritual traditions. There's a whole thing where he's basically ragging on the whole idea. And I couldn't help but like kind of laugh because like, okay, he's a scholar and he's talking from a scholarly point of view, and that's probably true. But when you look at it from a practitioner's point of view, fuck yeah, there's a universal feeling to a lot of this, right?
absolutely.
I just don't like, so I was like, okay, scholarly point of view, that's cool. You're a scholar.
Well,
That's cool. You're
not only
scholarly.
that, but like the human mind hasn't changed. Our methods of interacting with the world have remained the same, as this is the body. So the methods to trap concentration via your senses, your sense organs, right? Touch, smell, sight, sound, but those have not changed. So you can certainly meditate on a different color or letter or picture, but you're still using your visual channel, you know? That's just what it is. And we could change the sounds of the language and of the songs and of the prayers or the mantras or whatever. You're still using vibration to affect your hearing channel. I mean, so people can say what they want. I mean, to me, it's a science. I mean, the body, out of all the things, the science of the body and the ways in which we interact with it have been have been investigated for longer than anything else. And
It's a, yeah. I'm sorry,
yes,
go ahead.
certain things have progressed, certain things have stuck around, like these practices.
Yeah. I feel like it's hard to like, it's hard to say how exciting it is until you get into it. But if you get
Yeah.
in, it's fucking fascinating.
Yes.
You could be sitting here doing this thing with your own mind, your own body, your own breath, your own verbalization, whatever it is you're
Whatever.
doing,
Yeah.
right? And then all this fucking shit happens. It's
Mm,
amazing.
hmm.
And I don't know if that like gets anybody else hyped who might be listening to this, but like it gets me fucking hyped all the time. I mean, it's amazing. And they're different actually. So I love using the Sanskrit letters too. Maybe we'll do more on that at some other time, even,
Sure.
But like, I was like, okay, even this stuff here, this Abulafia stuff, it feels different. And I'll do it this week. I'm going through transition. It's the window of time to do it. I would do it this time of the year anyways,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of a freedom time of the year in some ways, right?
Yeah.
So I feel the freedom energies and I'll do the practice, and they'll create something in you, right? That makes you hype.
Yeah.
So just maybe before we take off, there's one other way of using these things, right? So one of the other ways, and it's a little bit more Madonna Kabbalah, but I've also done this too, and I think it's cool, which is you could link these letters of the 72 names of God. They'll link them up to certain psychological issues.
Mm.
So there's a book called The 72 Names of God where they kind of just did it. It's a little poppy, you know, but I think there's something to it. And
Mm-hmm.
they'll kind of go like, okay, here's the trio of letters that's relevant if you're having trouble with love and relationship. And that's where a certain amount of my trouble would be. So I
Mm-hmm.
would do those three letters, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I remember doing that at certain times going, I'm trying to like deal with the emotional ups and downs of this for me. And I would visualize it and I'd be like, oh yeah, this is curative. I can feel this. This feels healing actually, So I like, I'm always willing to like dip a toe in the water and see what things feel like. Right.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what it is, whether it's like, like we talk about like psychedelics or, meditative practices or other weird shit you could do, Chinese medical things or whatever,
Right.
right? It's good to
Right.
dip a toe in the water. So I was like, okay, let me see. Let me see if this really seems to do something. And I was like, yeah, this seems healing. So, you can go and look at those kinds of things. And they have ones that are built around specific issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
Problems with sexuality, they have a trio of letters for that, right? Or problems of guilt, they have a trio of letters for that. Or problems of self-esteem, or problems of generating passion for life, or problems of overcoming fear, or problems of like instilling deeper feelings of freedom, or whatever it is. They have all these different possibilities, where the different combinations of letters are kind of like things you can identify personally,
Have you
the things
used
you want
them?
to work on in yourself. Yeah, I think they're cool. Yeah, I think they're cool.
That's cool.
That they do seem to do something to you. So I just chose some random things out of the list of things they have to work on. But if you're curious, you can look up 72 names of God. It's poppy, it's Madonna Kabbalah, right? But underneath that, there's a deeper source that they're
Right.
drawing on, right?
The
And
supreme source, Eric.
yeah, the Ein Sof, the endless source, right? But yeah, I was like, yeah, I think there's like really things here, that I found to like have legit value, right? You can
Mm-hmm.
go through and choose something and you can go through and you can connect into the energy of that combination of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, my own personal experience was, yeah, I found those to be powerful antidotes, like in the moment as well. So sometimes it would be sitting there going, okay, let me take some time out. I'm going through this issue in my life. Let me sit. I'll contemplate these letters a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I did other Kabbalistic letter meditations too. There's a whole fucking slew of them. There's tons of them, right? And they're
Mm-hmm.
they're amazing, right? They are enlightening for sure. But with these, it was more personal, right? Okay, what's the
Mm-hmm.
issue I'm working on?
Mm-hmm.
And I found them to be helpful in that way that you can sit and concentrate them. And I also found them to be helpful, like once you got the thing going in your mind, you could use it in that moment by moment way. Oh, I'm feeling fear now in the moment. Okay, let me concentrate on this now in the moment, right? I'm feeling this relationship pain like in the moment. Okay, let me concentrate on this now, like in the moment. Oh, that feels different. That feels healing. That feels curative, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or whatever it is from those things that might be bugging you. I'm feeling low self-esteem now. I'm feeling unconfident now in the moment. Let me see if I can tap into this in the
Right.
moment, right? I think it's powerful, right? It's a
Yeah.
powerful idea. You can do it with other things too. I mean, I've done it with mantras that we talked about before
Yeah.
too. In the moment,
Yeah.
let me mantra, right? But this is another one that like during certain windows of my life, they were really important. So, when we knew we were going to do this episode, I was like, yeah, I did this. This one too was one of the ones I did when I was like, okay, let me tap into something that I need, from the rich spiritual tradition that we all deserve to be inheritors of,
Mm.
belongs to all of us, you know? And I thought, okay, these are powerful ones. So I wanted to share that one too, in terms of something a little bit different,
Mm-hmm.
something that can work in a very personal way. Yeah. All right. That's what I had on this.
I love it.
Yeah, it's cool. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you get interested, you can reach out to us. Maybe you can say, hey, you got a couple of letters about this?
Yeah.
We'll send you a photo. Mhm.
Yeah.
Try it out. See
Or
what
you
you
can get the
think.
book.
or you can go out and buy the book. But if you feel real cheap, you're like, nah, I don't want to buy the book
Nah.
again. We got your back.
Yeah.
We'll help you. We'll help
Yeah.
you. You can give it a tumble. And if you're like right back, like that sucked, that did nothing, then we'll just ignore that email.
Yeah, no problem. We'll keep moving. Right to spam.
Say it seems really awesome. We'll talk a whole bunch of positive shit about you.
Yeah. Yeah. But if not,
No, nothing.
Won't even mention it.
Right into the trash.
Exactly.
No, but seriously, I've done it with other people. I don't know if they ever really did it seriously enough, to be honest. But I said, hey, you really got an issue in your life? Try this and do it for real. It's like, really try. Yeah, I pass it on to people.
Nice.
Yeah. It's different, right? It's a little different kind of a take. Yeah. Yeah. All right, cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, brother. Well, that was cool. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. Awesome. And as always, thank you for doing all the other things that we do.
You too, Daniel.
Oh, well, thanks so much. And thanks to the audience.
Seriously, this whole thing, like, thanks everybody, and thanks to you, Daniel, and like vice versa. I know, like, this shit adds a lot to my life. What we've been doing has been really important.
Totally. Yeah, no, same for me. And we appreciate everybody tuning in, listening, reaching out to us, sharing with your friends and family and enemies and all the other things. It's good to mention the enemies because it reminds you that not everyone loves you. So we got some work to do. But, please feel free to email us at ginandtantra@gmail.com. Leave a, like, comment, subscription in the YouTube. It costs you nothing. It helps us out, deeply in the algorithm for sure to, kind of help our mission to reach more people. We are sponsored by our motherfucking selves. So there's that, so that helps us out, if you're on Instagram, we're up there too. The Gin and Tantra podcast. So, we're out there a little bit trying to, spread the good word, if you will, the gospel, but without the dogma. And that's definitely, that's something that we both believe in. So, thank you so much for tuning in. For Eric, this is Daniel. We'll catch y'all on the next one. Peace.